Hello, I'm Russell Sturgis. I'm the founder and principal of the Centre for Western Mindfulness. Welcome to the next instalment in the series of blogs that I'm doing on forgiveness. And today's blog, we're looking at judgment and this concept of judge not. And so this is another dimension of forgiveness that we add to the ones that we've discussed previously. Have you ever considered the irony of a theology that promotes the concept that, as it does in like the Sermon on the Mount, to not resist evil and to judge not, yet promotes the idea of a God who is all about judgment and punishing evil? You would begin to understand why, in spite of the fact that there's a teaching around not judging and a teaching around not resisting evil, which is both really about practicing this process of forgiveness, you can see why when we attribute judgment and punishment to God, how people justify the fact that that's how they can turn up in the world, that they're able to come to situations in life that would ask them to apply forgiveness. In other words, to not judge and to not resist, but in fact that's what they still end up doing. And of course, as I'm alluding to here, is the fact that we have this judging, punishing God, and so therefore we're justified in acting in much the same way. So I want to explore today this notion that there's another way of approaching life beyond this idea of judging others. Now, the fifth beatitude in the Sermon on the Mount says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." So what we've got is this really interesting thing where it says that if you do one thing, you're going to get that back. Course in Miracles has a really lovely saying, giving and receiving are the same, and they happen in the same instant. So they sort of see it as being a much more immediate thing. Interestingly enough, a little bit further on in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about judgment. And he says, "Judge not, that ye be not judged, for with what judgment ye judge, you will be judged. And with what measure you extend, it will be returning to you." That measure will be returning to you. So we've got this whole idea that there's this reciprocation of energy. You give out love and love's returned. You give out judgment and judgment's returned. And so we've got this whole idea that in any moment we have the capacity to apply these concepts of either forgiveness or judgment, and based on what we're being told, with the full understanding that whatever we extend is going to be returned to us. The interesting thing about judgment and about forgiveness is that they can't actually share the same mind space. So if you're in a place of judgment, then there's no room for forgiveness. And of course, if you're in a place where you're choosing forgiveness, then there's no space for judgment. So one of the really powerful and wonderful things about our capacity and desire to choose forgiveness over judgment is that it actually blocks out that. And so it makes it impossible then for judgment to be extended to us. What we've meted out will be meted back to us. So if all we're extending in this moment is forgiveness and mercy, then as the Beatitude says, that's what comes back to us. Both judgment and forgiveness are effectively selective observations of an event. Invariably, judgment as a way of relating to an event is habitual. So in other words, it's a habitual projection that we have about something that's going on. And chances are we've been exposed to that particular situation or similar forms of that many times, and we've developed the habit of responding habitually. And, a classic example of that is in traffic, where we get cut off or things happen in traffic and we move immediately into this place of judgment about the driving behaviour of somebody else on the road. And we've developed a habit about that. And I don't know about you, but I can speak that in from my own past, it wasn't a particularly healthy one. I could be very angry and get very upset and very judgmental about how other people were driving. So we've got this difference, and of course the forgiveness as a mechanism of selectively observing, of course, takes more effort and until such times as it becomes our habit. But to make that transition from judgment as a habitual way of responding and choosing forgiveness, there's got to be a reprogramming take place where there's this capacity to reprogram neural pathways to choose forgiveness in response to something as opposed to being judgmental. Now, I'll come back to that programming in a little bit, but I just want to add another thought in here. In the Course in Miracles, there's a statement that says all behaviour only can come from two motives. Either people are extending love or they're giving a call for help. Now, based on that rationale, and I'd really like you to maybe even stop the video for a minute and think about that everything that you do is either being motivated through a loving state of consciousness, or it's being motivated through a scarcity, fear, but this whole idea that it's a call for help. Obviously, we could draw the conclusion that forgiveness is the process of extending love. This then suggests that judgment is in fact a call for help. And so if suddenly you catch yourself being judgmental about someone or something, or that you're the recipient of somebody else's judgment, based on this observation, it's a call for help. So in other words, when you move into the place of being judgmental, it is in fact a call for help because it's not extending love. If that's the case and you are the one that's judging, then be gentle with whoever you are judging, as it's your projection, your own call for help. Obviously, if somebody did something offensive, it's also their call for help. So all of a sudden, we're now starting to take a whole new, deeper appreciation of what's going on here, because their behaviour, if it wasn't loving, is a call for help, and my behaviour, by virtue of the fact that it's judgment, isn't loving, and so therefore it's my call for help. So here we have a situation where people are needing help and are calling out for it by virtue of their behaviour. A good strategy for this call for help thing and being able to identify what the call for help is in relationship to the other person. One of the things that you could do once you realise and remember that their behaviour is a call for help, you could ask the question, what could this person tell me that would help me to understand why they are the way they are? So in other words, this is about you trying to understand what the call for help is. Now, it may not be that it's blatantly obvious, and so it may be that you will play a bit of a mind game in terms of coming up with a rationale for it. Or if you're so attuned, it might be that there could be a bit of inspiration. As Rudolf Steiner talks about, inspiration, intuition, and imagination. Any of those three might actually kick in here in order for you to gain a greater appreciation of what's going on. Now, recognising your call for help, a really good question. There's lots of questions that you could answer, but this is a good one. What's going on about my self-esteem that has me want to resort to feeling good about myself by making somebody else feel bad? So in other words, when we make a judgment about somebody, we're diminishing their value. And of course, it could be determined that that the motive for doing that is in order to find value for ourselves. So in other words, we're feeling in such a bad place about our own worth that the only way we can feel any sense of value is by making somebody feel worth less than us. And so the question is, what's going on right now? And this is the way that you're able to see what your call for help is in this moment, is to ask yourself, what's going on in my world right now that I feel the need to want to make somebody else feel worse than me? Now, recognizing that it's a call for help invites you to then practice mindfulness. And mindfulness is how we reprogram neural pathways. And based on the Centre for Western Mindfulness, our definition of mindfulness is remembering in each moment that you have a choice to be kinder or loving to yourself and to others. So you've observed the facts of what's gone on. You've observed in this place of judgment that you've got your own narrative that you're dealing with, and that this other person has a call for help, a narrative that they're dealing with. You've come to that place of being able to do that. You've noticed that there's a projection going on in the sense that you're projecting a value onto this other person. But now you have the opportunity to choose to remember that you have the choice to be loving in this place. And so here's where this whole thing of mercy now kicks in, is that in extending mercy, mercy comes back to us. Now, each time you remember that there's a loving choice, you're building the new neural program for forgiveness to be your modus operandi when presented with somebody who's acting like an idiot, that deserves to be punished based on the old way that we see it, to have judgment thrown upon them. But what we're saying here is that there's an opportunity when you practice being mindful of the loving choice, that if you do that sufficiently, what happens is you develop a whole new neural pathway of responding to these sorts of situations that sees you opt for mercy and forgiveness. So when you relate to another's call for help by being more loving, interestingly enough, immediately you receive that in return, which helps your own call for help. As I said before, traffic's a really classic example of this, and I've certainly, anyone who's sort of been in an extended relationship with me has seen that in the past I had the capacity to become quite judgmental in traffic, and judgment went to the need for punishment, so hellfire and damnation, although I couldn't do anything about it. And this is really a litmus test for how you're going with this one, is how you turn up in traffic. By choosing to consciously relate to what's going on, it might be that there's something going on in this person's life in this moment, that they do have a call for help in terms of their behaviour in the traffic, that they're running late for something, that they're in an emergency. It could be anything. And it doesn't really matter, because you can make up whatever it is that you think could justify them doing what they're doing. And that becomes the invitation for you to, instead of judging them, remember that you have the choice to be loving. And it may be that you extend some peace and love from a distance. One of the exercises that I used to use if I ever needed to extend love to somebody would be to imagine my heart and my body being filled with golden light. Oh, interesting thing, no golden light if there's judgment. So imagine that I'm in that place of golden loving light within my being, and I see a stream of that going out of me and enveloping this other person, holding them in a loving space. And this is the point at which we're extending mercy. This is the point at which we're able to go, hang on a second, this is a call for help. And so in traffic, we're able to do this. Now, I've been practicing this for some years now, and I have to say that in the biggest majority of cases, do I have it perfect? Not quite, but I reckon I'm pretty close to 98%, if not 99% of the time, I'm able to maintain that consciousness of mercy and that state of forgiveness in the traffic now, to the point where I can just sit in the traffic and really enjoy my experience of being able to commute in a car from point A to point B without having to lose my center of peace. And so what you do is you begin to not only do that, for example, in a situation like traffic, or maybe in the work situation or in the home situation, you start to extend it to all the different dimensions of your life. And this starts to become a way of life. So in that moment of remembering kindness, of either a thought or an action, you'll find yourself losing your angst. And you'll actually feel a sense of comfort, a sense of inner peace that sustains you in terms of your health and well-being. And because these are the other knock-on effects, is that ongoing stress, which is tied up with judgment, impacts on our health and well-being. Inner peace, and there's so much research about these things, impacts on our health and well-being. And so if you can imagine what it's like when you get to your destination, if you maintained your peace and you hop out of your car and you bring that energy to wherever it is, whether it's home at the end of the day or work at the beginning of the day, that you're able to walk in with an energy of peace. Not only are you making a difference to you and the person who is in the traffic, but then you're impacting on the people you work with or with your family, and of course your own inner health and well-being. So, judge not that you be not judged is another one of these dimensions of moving into being merciful as an act of forgiveness. It's a conscious choice. It doesn't come easy because judgment is habitual. But by remembering that there's a loving choice in each of these opportunities, there will be a tipping point where you will make the loving choice. Thanks for tuning in again. I hope you get to have a bit of fun with this. If you want to know more about these concepts in the work that we do at the Centre for Western Mindfulness, go to eapmentor.com. You can go to our webpage, our Facebook page, and there you'll be able to see lots of interesting stuff that we put up several times a week on mindfulness as a way of life. And please don't hesitate to contact us via the details that you'll see at the bottom of our webpage if you'd like to know more about the Pathways to Mindfulness program, which is really about how to integrate forgiveness, amongst other things, into your life so that it becomes a way of life.